Measures directed at the individual. Ultimately, aggressive behavior is performed by individual actors. Therefore, a central objective is to influence the individual person so as to reduce the likelihood that he or she will show aggressive behavior, both as a habitual pattern of behavior over time and in a specific situation. As discussed in Chapter 2, psychological theories conceptualize aggressive behavior as the result of an individual's learning history in the course of socialization and the interplay of affective, physiological, and cognitive processes in a specific situation. Thus, influencing these processes seems like a promising approach for reducing the likelihood of aggressive behavior. Punishment and observational learning. There is ample evidence that aggression is a form of learned behavior, shaped by direct reinforcement and observational learning. See Chapter 2. Therefore, it follows that aggression can also potentially be reduced using the same mechanisms, by introducing punishment to reduce the likelihood of aggressive behavior and providing non-aggressive role models to promote non-aggressive responses and the acquisition of non-aggressive scripts. The principle of reinforcement suggests that aggression should decrease and eventually be extinguished if it is followed by negative consequences such as punishment. Indeed, punishment is widely used to deter people from engaging in aggressive behavior. However, learning theory tells us that the effectiveness of punishment in stopping people from acting aggressively is dependent on several critical preconditions. Berkowitz, 1993. The anticipated punishment must be seen as adverse so that the desire to avoid it is sufficiently strong. It must have a high probability of being imposed, which implies that the odds of being detected must be high. It must be imposed swiftly after the aggressive behavior for the connection to be made between the aggressive behavior and the negative consequence. Affective arousal must not be so high that it prevents actors from engaging in a rational calculation of the costs of an aggressive behavior in terms of the likely punishment. The person has to see alternative behavioral options in the given context. If these conditions are met, punishment may be an effective strategy for stopping people from behaving aggressively on future occasions. However, the probability that these necessary conditions will co-occur in a given situation is relatively low, which limits the scope of punishment as a strategy for controlling aggression at the individual level. In addition to this practical limitation, a more fundamental criticism of punishment must be raised. Punitive responses, particularly in the form of verbal and corporal punishment, may in themselves instigate aggression by functioning as aggressive cues or norms. They may reinforce aggressive scripts by presenting aggressive behavior as an acceptable way of regulating interpersonal and intergroup conflict. This has been shown by a large number of studies showing that harsh parental discipline is associated with higher levels of aggressive behavior in children. A multicultural study with 2 data waves confirmed the significant association between corporal punishment and child aggression. Alampay et al., 2017. Imposing negative consequences to reduce aggression needs to be embedded within a more general approach towards social-emotional learning, in which the primary aim is to reward desirable rather than to punish undesirable behavior. A second approach based on learning principles is observational learning, as discussed in Chapter 2 with reference to Bandura's well-known Bobo doll studies. Exposure to non-violent role models is directed at the acquisition of new behavioral repertoires by which aggressive response patterns can be replaced in a more lasting way. Longitudinal evidence has demonstrated that low physical punishment and low interparental aggression are elements of positive family interactions at 8 years of age that predict lower levels of criminal violence at 48 years. Regarding exposure to models in the media, the meta-analysis by Coyne et al. 2018 found a significant, albeit small, negative association between watching pro-social media content and aggressive behavior. Both punishment and observational learning principles suggest that promoting the use of non-aggressive discipline strategies by parents is a viable strategy for reducing children's aggressive behavior. This objective is an integral part of parent management training designed to teach parents to interact with their children in a way that avoids negative and reinforces positive social behavior. Parent management training was shown in a wide range of studies to be successful in terms of changing children's antisocial behavior patterns. Anger control. At the level of affective processes, anger has been identified as a critical antecedent of aggressive behavior, and evidence for the link between deficits in anger regulation and aggressive behavior was discussed for children, Chapter 3, and adults, Chapter 4. This research suggests that promoting the ability to control their anger, e.g., in response to a provocation, should reduce individuals' readiness to show an aggressive response. Anger management trainings aim to achieve just that. They are primarily directed at individuals with a history of poor anger control, but may also be used in the general population to promote anger regulation skills. The focus of anger management training is on conveying to the aggressive individual an understandable model of anger and its relationship to triggering events, thoughts, and violent behavior. Anger management training. Convey to aggressive individuals an understandable model of anger and its relationship to triggering events, thoughts, and aggressive behavior. Anger management approaches draw heavily on the principles of cognitive behavioral therapy, in particularly Meichenbaum's 1975 stress inoculation training, which was adapted to anger management by Novico, 1975. The central features of the anger-related stress inoculation training, as summarized by Beck and Fernandez, 1998, are presented in Table 12.3. In the course of the training, participants first learn to identify the cues that arouse their anger and to reduce their angry affect by interpreting the situation in a de-escalating way. Next, they are trained to use relaxation techniques to calm themselves, which are then combined with the cognitive strategies for self-appeasement. The two strategies are rehearsed through role-playing and practiced repeatedly so that they can be activated on cue in anger-eliciting situations. Table 12.3. The Stress Inoculation Training Approach to Anger Management. Phase 1. Identification of situational triggers which precipitate the onset of the anger response. Rehearsal of self-statements intended to reframe the situation and facilitate healthy responses, e.g., I can handle this, it isn't important enough to blow up over this. Phase 2. Acquisition of relaxation skills. Coupling cognitive self-statements with relaxation after exposure to anger triggers, with clients attempting to mentally and physically soothe themselves. Phase 3. Exposure to trigger utilizing imagery or role play. Practicing cognitive and relaxation techniques until the mental and physical responses can be achieved automatically and on cue. A meta-analysis of anger management studies based on the stress inoculation approach was conducted by Beck and Fernandez, 1998. Their analysis included a total of 50 studies, the majority of which used self-reported anger as the dependent variable. The remaining studies used behavioral observation of aggression as the criterion. In total, 40 studies compared differences in anger or aggressive behavior between an anger management group and a control group, and 10 studies explored intra-individual changes in the critical variable, anger or aggression, from a pre-test to a post-test subsequent to the anger management training. The meta-analysis yielded a large effect size across the set of studies, average weighted D equals 0.70. Suggesting that anger management is an effective strategy for reducing anger-based aggression. A review of 42 studies conducted between 2000 and 2017 revealed a significant reduction in anger following an anger management intervention in all but one of the studies. A meta-analysis of school-based anger management interventions with children, including 60 studies, found a significant yet small effect in terms of a reduction in anger, D equals negative 0.33, and aggression, D equals negative 0.34. A meta-analysis of anger management interventions with violent offenders showed a reduction in violent recidivism of 28% in the intervention groups across 14 studies. Anger management training is often used as part of a broader package of strategies of cognitive behavioral interventions. For example, it is one element of an approach called aggression replacement training, ART, where it is combined with the training of social skills for handling interpersonal conflict and with the promotion of moral reasoning in terms of strengthening participants' sense of fairness and respect for others. Recent reviews suggest that this approach may be effective in reducing aggressive behavior, although a number of methodological problems of the available evaluation studies were noted. In addition, improving anger management has been part of interventions based on inducing mindfulness, which are designed to teach participants to focus their attention, be non-judgmental and accepting, and be present in the moment. There is evidence that mindfulness interventions may reduce aggressive behavior, both in community and offender samples, but similar concerns regarding the methodological strength of the evidence-based have been raised as for the ART studies. Whereas anger management interventions are specifically designed to enable individuals to control their angry affect, a more general approach is to promote individual self-control beyond anger management. In a study by Denson et al. 2011, participants in the intervention condition underwent 2 weeks of self-control training that involved a physical regulation task when engaging in everyday activities, e.g., using their non-dominant hand when brushing their teeth or carrying items. In a subsequent experimental session, those in the training condition were less likely to respond aggressively to a provocation and reported less anger towards the provocateur than untrained participants in the control condition. A critical limitation of anger management interventions is that they can only work with individuals who are aware of the fact that their aggressive behavior results from a failure to control their aggressive impulses and who are motivated to change their inadequate handling of these impulses. Unfortunately, these requirements are rarely met in those high-risk groups who experience the greatest problems with anger control. Eliciting incompatible responses. Whereas anger management interventions are designed to promote a person's ability to control anger in the longer term, evidence suggests that it is also possible to counteract anger-based aggressive behavior situationally. This is done by eliciting affective states and cognitions that are incompatible with anger, and thereby buffer the effects of aggression-eliciting stimuli on angry affect. And anger-related cognitions. Tyson, 1998. For example, Craigie and Beinek, 2012, showed that participants who listened to music rated as pleasant in a pilot study, e.g. Grieg's Pure Night Suite, while receiving a provocation, subsequently reported less anger than did participants who listened to music rated as aversive, a mix of hardcore and techno, or those in a no-music control condition. Addressing the buffering role of music in a real-life context, Wiesenthal et al. 2000 assigned a sample of commuters to listen to self-selected music while driving to work or to a no-music group. Depending on the level of traffic congestion on the route to work, participants were classified as experiencing low versus high traffic congestion, representing different stress levels. Self-reported driver stress was the dependent variable. Under low traffic congestion conditions, listening to music made no difference, but under high congestion conditions, participants in the music group reported significantly lower levels of stress than did those in the no music condition. For a discussion of research on the link between driver stress and aggressive driving, see Chapter 7. Music is just one way to elicit positive affective states that are incompatible with anger. A study by Craigie et al. 2018 found that participants who were angered by negative feedback were more relaxed, less angry, and showed less aggressive behavior in terms of negative evaluations of a Confederate if they received the feedback while leaning back in a deck chair as compared with sitting upright on an office chair. Research by Dewal et al. 2012 showed that gratitude, defined as a moral emotion, buffered the anger-eliciting effect of a provocation on aggressive behavior. Both feeling relaxed and feeling grateful are states that are incompatible with anger. By the same logic, Handling objects that induce positive mood, such as a cuddly toy, may instigate affective states that are incompatible with anger and promote prosocial behavior. Affective states do not have to be positive to be incompatible with anger and to buffer its impact on aggressive behavior. Inducing sadness can also eliminate the effect of a frustration on anger and aggressive behavior. Pond et al. 2012 argued that whereas anger and aggression are approach-oriented, disgust is avoidance-oriented, eliciting withdrawal behavior. Therefore, the urge to withdraw should interfere with aggression that requires approach, so that people who are sensitive to the experience of disgust should be less inclined to show aggressive behavior. Supporting this line of reasoning, they showed in a series of studies that high disgust sensitivity was linked to less aggressive behavior across different measures of aggression. The buffering effect of sadness may be explained in the same fashion. Eliciting incompatible responses to suppress aggression can also work via the cognitive route. In another study by Craigie and Bynek, 2012, participants who were listening to pleasant music while receiving a provocation in the form of a negative essay evaluation for the essay evaluation paradigm, see Chapter 1, took significantly longer to recognize aggressive words in the lexical decision task than did provoked participants who were listening to aversive music or no music at all. A study by Bremner et al. 2011 showed that priming religious thoughts decreased anger following a negative feedback in the essay evaluation paradigm. After receiving a provocation, their participants were either asked to pray for a sick fellow student or just to think about her. Those who had engaged in praying subsequently reported less anger than did those who had merely thought about the sick student. A second study found a buffering effect of preying on aggressive behavior measured by the noise blast paradigm. Greenmeyer and Oswald, 2009, asked participants to play either a prosocial video game, Lemmings, or a neutral game, Tetris, before administering a word completion task as a measure of aggressive cognitions. Participants who had played the prosocial game produced significantly fewer aggressive word completions than did those who had played the neutral game. In a subsequent set of studies, Greitmeyer, 2011, showed a parallel effect for music with prosocial as opposed to neutral lyrics. Furthermore, participants reported lower state hostility and showed less relational and physical aggression after listening to music with prosocial as compared with neutral lyrics. Overall, there is some promise from the empirical evidence that eliciting affective and cognitive states that are incompatible with the experience of anger may be an effective situational strategy for reducing aggressive behavior. The findings have potential for translating them into real-life settings, such as playing pleasant music in public places. However, designing a rigorous evaluation of such measures outside the laboratory is likely to be challenging. Catharsis. The term catharsis refers to the idea in Greek tragedy that watching the unfolding and resolution of tragic conflict on stage leads to a purification or cleansing of the emotions of pity and fear in the audience and brings about spiritual renewal or release from tension. It has been borrowed in aggression research to describe the idea that symbolic engagement in aggressive thoughts or actions may reduce the need to engage in aggressive behavior with the potential to harm. As we saw in Chapter 2, Freud, in 1920, used the concept of catharsis to argue that the venting of hostile feelings can lead to a discharge of aggressive impulses that reduces the likelihood of aggressive behavior. Similarly, the idea that aggressive urges can be channeled into harmless forms of expression is part of Lorenz's 1996 steam boiler model of aggression, also described in Chapter 2. The idea that bottling up one's angry feelings carries the risk of uncontrolled outbursts of aggression, and that aggressive tensions can be released through sports activities, sarcastic humor, or killing opponents in a video game, is deeply ingrained in everyday beliefs about aggression. This is reflected, for instance, in the popularity of rage rooms or anger rooms that have been opened in many parts of the world to offer people the chance to act out their aggressive impulses by smashing and destroying objects. Brigitta, 2016. However, anger rooms are more likely to fill the bank accounts of their owners than to make their customers more peaceful and agreeable. Both theoretical considerations and empirical findings suggest that engaging in aggressive behavior in this seemingly innocuous way is not only ineffective, but even counterproductive for reducing aggression. There is plenty of evidence that the imaginary performance of aggressive behavior, e.g., in pretend play or when watching media violence, is more likely to enhance aggression than to reduce it, e.g., Bushman 2002. Several theoretical explanations can account for this finding. See Chapter 2. Social learning theory would say that thinking about the positive effects of aggression has a reinforcing quality, and script theory would argue that engaging in mental simulations of aggressive behavior rehearses aggressive scripts. Furthermore, symbolic acts of aggression can be regarded as aggressive cues that prime hostile thoughts and feelings, and thereby pave the way for aggressive behavior. It is clear from a number of studies that aggressive fantasizing is positively linked to aggressive behavior, e.g. Guerra et al. 2003. Focusing on the arousal component of catharsis, Verona and Sullivan 2008 conducted a study in which they made participants engage in aggressive behavior by delivering unpleasant air blasts to a Confederate, and recorded the participants' heart rate before and after they engaged in aggressive behavior. They found that those participants who showed the greatest reduction in heart rate after performing the aggressive behavior, that is, those who could be said to have experienced the most catharsis, were most aggressive in the next phase of the experiment. This finding indicates that the reduction in arousal experienced after an aggressive act makes people more rather than less aggressive in a subsequent situation. Results by Brezin and Gordon 2013 yielded similar results in a more realistic context by showing that individuals in a diary study who reported lower levels of anger after reacting with an aggressive as compared with a distracting response were more likely to show aggressive behavior when they felt angry on following days. Several approaches for preventing aggression by targeting the individual have been discussed in this section. Support was shown for changing aggressive behavior through observational learning, improving anger control, and eliciting responses that are incompatible with aggression in reducing aggressive behavior. The evidence suggests a more critical view of punishment because it only works under certain conditions and it sends out the message that coercion is an acceptable strategy. Finally, little systematic evidence is available to support the idea that the imaginary or symbolic expression of aggression can serve to inhibit aggression. Instead, feeling good about aggressive behavior increases the chances of future aggression, in line with social learning and social cognitive theories of aggression.